The big question we're still dealing with as a committee is there benefit in talking to somebody like Donald Trump and requesting he come in? That's something we're negotiating back and forth on whether we want to do that and what that looks like.
What is the value in speaking directly to the former president and the vice president when the former vice president's chief of staff and his legal advisor have testified to you? Why do you need him physically there? And what would the president's testimony do?
Yeah, and I'm not sure we do need them physically there because, again, we're getting a lot of information, and I think you'll see after Thursday's hearing we know a lot. Look, Donald Trump has made it clear that he doesn't mind not telling the truth. Let's just put that mildly. He lies all the time. I wouldn't put it past him to even lie under oath. So I'm not sure what the value is there. That's, again, something I think the thing to keep in mind is this investigation is not winding down. We may be towards the end of this tranche of hearings. We may have more hearings in the future, and the investigation is still ongoing. Mm-hmm. So we're getting to the bottom of what we need to know.
Tranche of hearings. What does that mean? I mean, how many are you thinking?
Well,
what
we've
more
done.
Do you have?
This will be our 8th hearing. This is the end in this kind of grouping. I fully expect that when the report comes out, we may have a hearing or two around that. Mm-hmm. But of course, as you saw with Cassidy Hutchinson, if we get information that the American people need to know, we may end up bringing up more hearings at that time too.
If I'm Donald Trump, I don't think it's exactly good news to hear that the January 6th committee is still considering asking me to come in and testify. And by the way, I know Trump loves to pretend that the law doesn't apply to him, but in case you thought he'd be able to simply ignore a congressional subpoena if one is issued, ask Steve Bannon how that's working out for him. After the former Trump advisor ignored his own congressional subpoena, he vowed to make sure that the charges against him would become, quote, a misdemeanor from hell for the Biden administration. Turns out that wasn't quite the case, considering all of Bannon's legal defenses fell flat, prompting his lawyer to ask a district judge in court, quote, what's the point of going to trial if there are no defenses? To which the judge replied, agreed. In other words, Bannon's going to trial admittedly with no defense, meaning he's basically just paying his lawyers a lot of money and eating up a lot of time to basically plead guilty. But hey, I guess when you commit indefensible acts, it tends to be difficult to defend yourself. And so with that said, given that Trump knows that the DOJ will clearly move forward with charges for flouting congressional subpoenas, he'd have to proceed knowing that doing so will only compound the issues that he's currently facing, which, to be clear, might be fine with him, considering he's likely already facing some pretty serious charges related to January 6th. So what's another charge or two on top of that? Another piece of less than appealing news for Trump is Kinzinger's announcement that while these hearings are set to conclude this Thursday, this is only the first tranche. And so we can likely expect more hearings in the future, which bodes especially poorly for Trump for 2 reasons. First, the more hearings that occur, the worse it gets for him. He and the rest of his party were hoping that these hearings would be largely ignored. Instead, more people have tuned in than normally watch the World Series. In fact, it's likely these hearings will be the most watched event of the year other than the Super Bowl. And according to reporting, because of the extent to which these hearings have hurt Trump, his mega donors are now abandoning him. And I don't think that another tranche of hearings will make that any better. But second, as these hearings continue to inch toward midterms, it'll obviously hurt Republicans politically as well. Remember, this is a party that almost unanimously lined up behind the guy who we all now know defrauded his own supporters, despite knowing full well that there was no fraud in the election and that there was no path to victory for him. And yet he was so hell-bent on installing himself as the winner that he chose to knowingly lie to the people who trusted him, even though he was told by a slew of senior campaign and administration officials that he lost the election legitimately. And yet still, despite all of that, 99% of Republicans continue to grovel at his feet because they have no governing philosophy, they have no moral code, they have no respect for our laws or institutions or even the very people they're supposed to represent. The one and only thing they care about is fealty to Donald Trump. If they think going all in on the guy who these hearings are exposing as a fraud is a sound electoral strategy, they're in for a pretty rude awakening. And finally, there's one more clip that I think is worth showing that once again bodes poorly for Trump, as Adam Kinzinger explains what's in store for Trump at this final hearing this coming week.
187 minutes. Mm-hmm. You're leading this hearing. You know what you can present at this point. Can you at least tell us if you filled in the blanks of, who the president was actually speaking with, why there weren't phone records, for example, of phone calls he may have placed during that time period?
We have filled in the blanks. I can't necessarily say that the motives behind every piece of information we know we'll be able to explain, but this is going to open people's eyes in a big way. The reality is, I'll give you this preview, the president didn't do very much, but gleefully watch television during this time frame. We're going to present a lot more than that. But I could only imagine I knew what I felt like as a U.S. congressman. If I was a president sworn to defend the Constitution, that includes the legislative branch, watching this on television, I know I would have been going ballistic to try to save the Capitol. He did quite the opposite.
In the past hearings, the January 6th committee has focused on the DOJ, on the vice president, on elections workers, on state legislators, on secretaries of state, on militia groups, on White House aides. But now they're going to focus on Donald Trump himself and what he was doing in the time that the insurrection was occurring. And this will likely be the most damning hearing yet, because it'll show the extent to which Trump not only refused to take any steps to stop the mayhem, but actually reveled in it and continued to pour gasoline onto the fire. As if his culpability wasn't already beyond obvious, this upcoming hearing promises to be the most devastating yet. And it's worth a reminder here, this is Adam Kinzinger, a Republican, speaking about this. We've also heard from Liz Cheney, a Republican, over the past few weeks. And nearly every witness for the televised hearings has also been a Republican. In other words, for every right-winger out there who claims that this is just some partisan witch hunt, just remember that Democrats have been almost entirely absent in this process. And the avalanche of evidence that we've heard thus far has come almost exclusively from Republicans. Notice how it's always the people who aren't worried about a Republican primary who miraculously find the courage to tell the truth. In the meantime, make sure you tune into this next hearing on primetime this Thursday. I'll be hosting the live stream on my YouTube channel. Just subscribe at Brian Tyler Cohen. But no matter where you watch, just tuning in will send a message to Trump, to Republicans, and to the DOJ that the American people are not only watching, but they're fully expecting accountability. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And to support my work beyond that, check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I cover the week's most important stories and interview the biggest players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, and so many more. The link is also right here on this screen. And finally, to take action yourself and sign petitions on the most important issues, go to briantylercohen.com/petition.